The first is really early on in leaving the safety net of a real job, and getting the GovTech Ventures URL, which
Yes.
just was the dream URL. And I remember calling my mentor and saying, "Can you believe that I got this?" And he was like, "Of course you got this. No one wants to invest in GovTech." So there was just like, okay, I have this thing. I have a thing. I don't know if it's a consulting firm. I don't know if it's an advisory firm, but it's called GovTech Ventures, and I'm the owner of it. I want to be remembered as someone who drew a spotlight to what I would argue is the most important functions of government, and that I left the systems better than they were to begin with.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to, we are chugging along season 2 of Alone Together. This is a call and a interview I've been excited to have for 2 years now. Is that right? How long have we known each
No.
other?
Yeah, I
Rachel
think
Stern
I
at
think
Gov,
we're coming up on your 2.
yeah, Rachel Stern at GovTech Ventures. And what's fun about this, the reason this call came together is I got a call reference. I got an LP reference. Hey, do you know this person? And, that was, like, prompted me. I was like, "Oh my god, I
You're like,
forgot about
"No,
Rachel.
I've
I
never
totally have
met
to have
her."
her on."
And
So anyways, thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for this LP, which, I'm just publicly saying you should write this check, uh, but, to Rachel, and you know who you are, and I'm so glad to have you on the show. I'm so glad that, that reference call brought us back together. How have you been?
yeah. I'm doing great. I'm doing great. We're coming up just past a year of fundraising, and starting to feel some real momentum, and so fun to like actually have money to deploy instead of like capital money,
You've made
instead
it.
of, like monopoly money.
You've made it, sis. Well, before we get into this, because you and I, we had too much time off camera just getting to catch up. Um, just to catch up our audience on this, would you do us the honor of just we're gonna get tech into you and all the awesome things about you as a person, but would you do us the honors of telling us a little bit about GovTech Ventures, the thesis, and how you came to this corner of investing?
This very weird corner of the market. So I have, first of all, thanks for having me. This is very exciting. I love it when worlds come together, and talking to smart, cool people in this sector who have a totally different thesis. That's the best part about being a GP and meeting other GPs is you're like, wow, that person has such a different vision than I do, and they're so smart and they're going to crush it. And you just get to know all these different corners of the market. But I have been living in this nexus of technology and state and local government for 15 years, which is a very long time to be in state and local government. I graduated from college and sort of had no idea what I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to go into campaigns because it turns out they'll give any job to an 18-year-old on a campaign. And they're like, hey, all of a sudden you're in charge of finance. Okay, great. And I actually ended up moving to St. Louis, Missouri, where I got sort of an internship and then a full-time job with a private equity firm. And the way that the private equity firm worked is they worked directly with state governments to create pools of capital that the government could allocate into areas or businesses or types of entrepreneurs in the state. And in doing so, this private equity firm had created a network of lobbyists in almost every state that were helping them create these programs. And my idea, which then turned into a decade plus long business, was taking that network of lobbyists and making it an asset that we could sell to other companies who were uncovered in government affairs across the country, but really needed on the ground support very quickly. Um, so
Can I
worked
just
with,
like, I was like, what made you, what clicked? I mean, this is not, I mean, being so like early, right? Like you started with, I don't know, I just wanted, I just wanted autonomy and they'll let 18 do anything.
I thought I
Can
might want to go into campaigns. The reason I moved to St. Louis was for a program called the Coro Fellows, which very few people have heard of, but it's this great program for people who don't want to know what they want to do with their lives, where for 9 months you work in a different sector every month. And you have 30 days to complete a project like a management consultant. Then there's a lot of leadership training and sort of business training, and you're part of a cohort. And it was amazing exposure. We worked in labor unions and campaigns and government and nonprofits and for profits. And this for profit 30-day placement was basically the structure where they said, we have this problem. We're spending all of this money every year across the country on these lobbyists. How can we recoup that cash? That was sort of the problem set that I was working with. And so there was a very natural evolution to say, okay, well, this is actually an asset that you could sell. And then they kept me on for an additional month to see if anyone would buy it. and
Yeah.
and you know, I often say it's better to be lucky than good. And I was at an event, I was at a political event, and I was standing next to a guy at the buffet table. And I always tell young people that if you're looking to network, stand by the buffet table because you always have something to say to someone. You're like, "Wow, the salami is great. Have you tried the crudité?" It's just a really easy warm Um, you gotta network, you gotta hustle. And I was standing next to a guy who was, like, the 2nd government affairs hire for Lyft. And he was like, "We are being regulated in every state." This is early days in Lyft. I think they had just raised their Series B. He's like, "We are being put out of business in every state. Can I just hire you to cover the country for us?" And I said, "Why, yes, sure you can." And so all of a sudden, we were covering 30 states for Lyft. And by we, I mean Rachel Stern at 21
It's
was
like,
going
okay.
capital. Yeah, I know. It's just you can't predict these things, but I was going to state capitals and I was building coalitions with the Uber lobbyists and we were, lobbying the governor's offices for insurance policy that would cover ride sharing, which hadn't existed before. I learned a lot about coalition building. I learned a lot about legislation as a market creator or a market destroyer. I went to a bunch of state capitals, which I would not wish on anybody. Um, and this business was born. And in Silicon Valley, word gets out, and so we were pulled into Zoom and Square and Hims and Hers and Bird scooters, and we got to see a lot of these emerging technologies. And I hired a team around me to sort of manage this outsourced government affairs practice. But I also met a founder who had an idea for a product to sell into state and local government. He was really smart, based in Kansas City. Um, and it was this era where states and cities were just starting to adopt the cloud. And so SaaS was becoming possible for the first time. Historically, government had bought these huge, antiquated, multi-million dollar server farms that were existing on-prem, and took many, many years to implement and also many years to untie. And SaaS was just this like awakening of overlaying on top of these existing systems and making those processes more efficient. And this guy had an idea. He didn't have any money to pay me. And he said, "Can I exchange equity for services, for
Mm,
introductions and all of these,
mm.
you a pool you can earn into if you help me scale this thing?" Didn't know what equity was. Thought like, okay, let's give it a go. And so for 3 years, he and I would travel around and we'd go to these state capitals and we'd pitch this and we'd go to the conferences with the governors and we'd go to the conferences with the DMV heads. And I learned what it was like to sell an actual product into government. And we made every mistake in the book. We did not do any of it right. But eventually, we got our first customer, and then our second customer, and then our fourth customer, and then our 20th customer, and it ended up being a company that now is worth over
But,
$1 billion.
I mean, let me
I
ask this
fell
too.
in.
That
Yeah.
I easily could see how that you would, right? That because I feel like B2G motions and GovTech in general, I mean, is misunderstood, right? Like, and this isn't my area of expertise, but when I a lot of LPs are like, "Oh, I do GovTech. Is it military?" I'm like, "Nope, then I'm out." Um, you're taking a total different tack, right? You're this is the small, local, medium government like traction. What
Yeah.
Let me ask, what does venture miss about the intersection between government and venture and the type of scales and that sort of intoxicating like selling aspect that everyone thinks about Silicon Valley, but I don't think they think about it from City Hall perspective. Like what is the market missing around that? like, the what you
it's
just
such like a
described is that traction and juice that I want my founders to have is like, "Okay, I'm in. I want this." But I think people don't see that in the B2G world, and I just
yeah.
wonder from your vast experience, what are we missing? What is the venture world missing, about understanding this nook of the startup
Well,
ecosystem?
I think very few people think about state and local government in their day-to-day lives, even though it's the part of our nation that impacts the most. It's, the things that keep schools open and fixes your potholes and puts stop signs up and pays your parking tickets. And I think it can be easy to sort of miss the forest through the trees and think about government as like the federal government and DOD. And in fairness, there's a lot of money to be made
There is.
in defense and federal government. And I love the way that the federal government is thinking, 15 or 30 years out strategically and how to keep us on the cutting edge of innovation and protecting our country. The reality is cities and states are not able to think that far out because they are serving the citizens every single hour of every single day. And so there's a much shorter, sort of less long term thinking, less strategic framing.
Hmm.
But what it means is they need solutions right now. And there's been this ripple effect. I mean, when I started, it was SaaS, then the pandemic happened, and there was this sort of mass digitization of services that, essentially overnight we could no longer go into government offices and do the things we needed. And now we're seeing this inflection point with AI and it's a little bit passe at this point, but Doge in its most simple form, which is this pressure for efficiency and doing more with less and a cutting off of federal funding for cities and states and grants for cities and states. And so what that means is there's a customer set who is actively looking for solutions right now to solve their problems that they're living with every single day. And that's really exciting to have a customer set that's actively looking for innovation, actively looking for technology partners, actively looking to become more well versed in AI. And what happens in state and local government is there's this unbelievable network effect because unlike the private sector or even the DoD, there's no upside in keeping a strategic solution that works well to yourself. So governments are constantly telling each other about best practices, about innovation, about
Yeah.
companies that are great to work with, about tools that have made their lives easier. And so if you can keep your early customers really happy in government, they become your greatest evangelists.
Yeah.
And there's this really nice daisy chain effect of once you can get that first or second customer, which is by far the hardest thing in B2G, because you're asking people to take a risk on something that you haven't sold to people that look like them. And there's a lot of political pressure and there's a lot of budgetary pressure. That's the part of GovTech I think that Silicon Valley doesn't like, that really tricky uphill slog of having to talk to 500 customers to get your first one. But when you get your first one and they like you,
Yeah.
there's this domino and momentum effect that can happen. And so that's what gets me really excited about B2G. And I'm starting to see Silicon Valley actually come down into GovTech. I mean, YC put GovTech on their lists of things to watch in startups last year, which of course like led to a lot of great innovation and money flowing into the space. I think the challenge with traditional venture coming into early stage GovTech is there's a really long hold time. This is a patient capital play to get those initial contracts in place. And I have worked with companies before they've had contracts in place. And I have just decided for me and the fund, the sweet spot is to work with companies that already have at least one contract
Yeah.
that we can then go and paste 25 times. Um, but that sort of 0 to 1, the pre-contract to getting that first contract is such a long slog that it didn't make sense for the fund.
Yeah. It sounds like too the shorter horizon versus having to do these like very long, like 30-year either NSF or military federal level. Like
Yeah.
to be honest, just it suits the fund's 10-year horizon a little bit better from a return basis, right? Just as an LP. you're not gonna have to worry about
Yeah,
signing, like, 22-year extensions waiting for this thing to turn up roses, right? So is
to
that
actually take off. And yeah, no, that's exactly right. And to your point about sort of the fund horizon, something interesting is happening in state and local GovTech where all the companies that I was working with 15 years ago are now huge. They're, 800 million a year, a billion a year. And they're looking to buy these smaller companies really quickly. And so, my first hold on my first ever company, the one that was so successful, was 7 years until we had a transaction. Pretty traditional venture scale. And
Yes.
we've like since had two liquidity events. But what's actually happening right now is companies are being bought below 10 million of ARR in their first 2 or 3 years. And so there's this liquidity flywheel that doesn't necessarily look like traditional venture because you can't, unless you're a pure AI play and you're lovable, you're probably not a $500 million company in the first 6 months in GovTech. But if you can build the right sort of solution set for the right customer set, someone will buy you fast if you want.
Yeah.
And there's something really appealing to my LPs about that liquidity cycle that isn't just like the we hope one unicorn in the next 10 years comes out of this fund, but actually a lot of these companies are going to be doubles and triples, but a larger portion than a traditional.
Yeah. But there's so many things I wanna ask about, fundraising and IRLP is different, but before we do, like, you said something off air that I wanna return to. It's that you seem so dialed in, and this is feels like what you're meant to do, ranging from your history to the excitement you feel around this short sales cycle. But you've also said you're the most reluctant GP ever, and I would love to, draw that contrast for me where you seem exactly where you wanna be, but why do you think you're the most reluctant GP ever? Is that just like a platitudinal one down, "Oh, shucks, look at me"? Why do you really believe that you're the most reluctant GP ever?
Um, I think that when I left private equity and I decided I wanted to go out on my own, I saw how hard it looked to fundraise. I saw that there weren't other really funds in this corner of the market. There had been one historical fund that was no longer deploying capital, and there had been sort of a bunch of failed corporate venture arms within GovTech. And I just thought, like, I'm missing something here. Like, I got to figure out why none of these really worked. And I love working with startups. My husband said, "What's your dream job?" And I said, "Oh, it would just be beating up slide decks all day." I love marketing. I love how you're telling a story. I love the strategy. Um, I adore the founders I work with. And I just thought, I don't know that a fund is the most efficient way to work with them. I think that they can find me. I can take advisor share. Ideally, they can pay me a small retainer and I can just build this portfolio of small bets across a lot of different things and do the thing I want to do every day. Um, and a couple of things became really apparent in my year of sort of trying to make that work. Startups don't have any money. So I could take advisor shares and hope that they played out over 5 to 10 years, but, also we needed to buy groceries. So there was just like a practical element of like, how do you pay yourself to work with startups? And 2, I was meeting these fabulous founders who couldn't find early stage funding and were really either bootstrapping, great, love it when that happens, or just stuck because there was no one in the market that had sort of the understanding of GovTech and the patient capital in GovTech to say, there's something really here. We just understand it's not going to look like this in the first 3 months. It's going to look like this in the first year and a half. And it was sort of keeping me up at night. I was doing my best to syndicate deals. I was calling exited founders and I was calling family offices. I was calling other funds. I was trying to bring them into these deals that I was seeing and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. And finally I just thought like, why am I not doing this? Like what's the fear here? There's a real fear of failure. Everyone's telling me
Mhm.
how hard the fundraising market is.
Mhm.
Um, and there's all these sort of failed funds, or not failed funds, or very few people have built funds in this space. Am I missing something? And also, I didn't really want to be a solo GP. I thought these are the skill sets I'm really good at. I'm really great at marketing. I'm really great at finding founders and working with them and the strategy side, but I don't know how to run a fund. Well, I've got to go find a partner that knows how to run a fund, like wants to
Mhm.
do the back end, detail oriented fund work.
Yeah.
And so I spent months talking to people and, going down routes and being like, this
This is
guy's
how
great.
we
And
well, this
this,
is how we connected, right? Like, when
yeah,
we were just kind of like, "Hey, what are you doing?" Blah, blah, blah. I was like, "I'll tell you what I'm doing," and I'm improving my way as well to
it
I
is.
don't
It's
know
just
if
like
this
you're
is
just like soft shooting it, maybe like, I think I know the lyrics of this song, kind of. And I think I had an executive coach say, "Why do you feel like you need a founder right now, or a co-founder right now? Like,
Mhm.
you have all the basic skills. You can hire for the things that you're not as comfortable with
Yeah,
or that you're nervous about. But why can't you do this by yourself?" And that was sort of an aha moment for me, but it took me over a year to get there.
yeah,
Uh, and it just was a lot of me doubting myself, of doubting the market, of not being able to suspend disbelief that I would somehow be an exception to what was happening. And then
yeah,
there was one day where I was like, nothing ventured, nothing gained here. I guess I'm raising a fund.
yeah.
So it was just a long journey.
What was that can you take us in that moment? Like, was that a particular cataclysmic moment where you're like, "Oh, this is it. I remember exactly where I was, what I was drinking, what I was doing," or was this a slow boil where it just finally tipped over? I would love for you to take us into that moment. You're like, "Damn it, I'm gonna raise a fund." And because I think
Damn it,
that
I'm
is such
gonna do
a
that.
yeah, because I think back in my own recollection, there were 2 things. Like, for me, when I put my name on a shingle, and then for me, when I did first close and I pushed go and, like, that was like, "Ah, man, stuff just got real," right?
Yeah.
Did you have moments and that those are ones that mark my, like, "Ah, I've just now burned every bridge. This is what I'm doing." Like, do you have these moments, when you replay the game tape in your own head around your evolution and maturation of becoming a GP?
Yeah, there's 3. The first is really early on in leaving the safety net of a real job, and getting the GovTech Ventures URL, which
Yes.
just was the dream URL. And I remember calling my mentor and saying, "Can you believe that I got this?" And he was like, "Of course you got this. No one wants to invest in GovTech." I think he said nobody fucking wants to invest in GovTech, but I wasn't sure that was appropriate for the pod. But yeah, it was just
Fine.
like,
We're
yeah,
like, this is
duh.
this is not for kids. I
Yeah,
swear all
this
the
is
time. It's
so
fine.
there was just this, like, okay, I have this thing. I have a thing. I don't know if it's a consulting firm. I don't know if it's an advisory firm, but it's called GovTech Ventures and I'm the owner of it. So that was one moment. There was I'd never fundraised before, although I will say that lobbying prepared me really well for fundraising.
Hmm.
Um, the idea of comfort in pitching people, a comfort in hearing no, a comfort in adjusting the messaging around an idea based on the person you're talking to, just a certain personality type where you're very comfortable going into rooms and introducing yourself to people and not ever worrying that there was a certain like foundational element that I think enabled me to have a slightly easier time just breaking into the sales part of this.
Yeah.
Um, the second time was I remember turning to my husband a year ago in Christmas and saying, "I'm gonna put a pitch deck together, and I'm gonna go book myself a week in New York, and I'm gonna see how many meetings I can get." I was like, "We'll know." I think I said, "We'll know in 8 weeks if this is a thing."
And when was this? What time of what time where in the calendar?
This is like this is January of 2025.
Right. Well, that was right when
So
I did my first
hilarious.
close. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just like, "I'm gonna go try to meet a bunch of people." and I had cold email outreach, and I reached out to alums from my college and alums from my business school and just like put myself in New York for a week and got as many meetings as I could. And I got a bunch of meetings and no one invested. But I came back with a lot of feedback
Yeah,
about the
let's talk
idea,
about
about
that. Like, there's a lot
portfolio.
of feedback and failure. Tell me about that. Like,
Oh
what did
god.
you
Well, I met with a fund of it's so funny because there's a few firms and funds that I met with really early in my time that I just wish I was meeting now because it's more of a thing.
Yeah, I
Um,
samesies.
but I remember I was sitting you're right, you can't play it and you try to keep them in the loop so that they get excited about fun too, but I was sitting down in New York and Brooklyn with a fund of funds with my portfolio construction and my ideas, and he was asking me a lot of questions, I could not answer because I didn't really understand what portfolio construction meant, and what ownership meant and concentration meant. And I had sort of just based it on like what I thought venture capitalists did. I was like, so we need 50 companies and it's going to be 50 to 100K and we're going to look for unicorns. And he just said, you know, for a sector like this, what would get me excited is a highly concentrated, high ownership portfolio. And it hadn't even occurred to me that you could do something differently.
Yeah,
I didn't know what that meant.
right.
So he said, what I would like to see is why don't you go model that and see if that math makes more sense? And it really did.
Yeah,
like, like that
it's like,
better.
you're right. Don't look at me, I'm hideous."
Right. And he didn't end up investing because he could tell that I didn't know what I was doing. But there were every conversation I had, I went back and I changed the deck or I changed the pitch or I adapted sort of the vision of it in those, especially in those first 3 or 4 months. Um, but it took me 9 months to get to my first close. And there were a lot of relationships that took over a year to close on that first close. Um, and September of 2025, we were driving back from Denver, where I'm from, back to California, where we live. And I said to my husband, I don't know that this is a thing. I have all these people saying it's a good idea. I have all these people saying they've never heard anything like this. And I have all these people saying they're interested, and I just don't know how to get them to do anything. And no one's given me any money yet. And I don't know. And he said, I think you just need to set a do or die date. He was like, we've been kind of, again, I don't
Yeah,
know if this is appropriate, but just fucking around with a due date here.
do
And
it.
so, like,
Just
you just need to
let it
set
fly,
it. And
sister.
if it's
Let
a
it fly.
yeah. Yeah, and but, this goes back to the reluctant GP, which was I worried that if I set a date and no one did it, it was gonna be a true failure. Like, this is all fear. This is all self-doubt. And I remember we were coming back September 1st, and I said, "Okay, I'm gonna set a date for November 15th. It'll be the end of the year. I'll be almost a year into fundraising, and if not, I'm gonna go get a job." And I called all these people who had said tentative yes. And one of them called back and said, "I'm in for $1,000,000." And I was like, "Oh?" And he was like, "And I'm gonna go tell a bunch of people that I'm in for $1,000,000." And
That's huge.
there was the net I mean, truly, shout out to this guy and his partner who were the first money in and made this possible. Like, the fact that I could put their names on my deck was huge. They were these enormously successful exited founders in GovTech. The fact that they were calling and endorsing me to other people. And then I got to go back to all these other folks who had said, "Yeah, sure, meh." And I got to say, "I just got $1,000,000 check and I'm closing in 6 weeks. So are you in or are you out?" And that pressure compounded. And we ended up doing a first close in December. And we're going to hit a second close, I think, at almost double now in April. And it's just created this incredible momentum. And for a long time, it looked like it was gonna be a total absolute failure.
Yeah.
So, I I don't know if it's just
Good.
like is a certain amount of luck, it's a certain amount of perseverance, it's a certain amount of just hearing no all the time and saying like, "Well, I'm gonna hopefully hear yes from someone," but hearing yes from one person made all the difference.
Yeah, that story is so powerful because I think for people, and a lot of people who listen to this show are aspiring, I mean, GPs or angels, and much like when we I remember the picnic table we met at Camp Hustle, and thinking about it from a napkin, and I think people think there's some, like, mathematical proof, like A plus B equals C is like, I've meet the threshold, and now I can apply. It is, for me, it was exactly that. It was like someone who's just said yes, and now, look, let's not get it twisted. It's a seven-figure check. That's a pretty solid anchor. But I didn't have that. And we're, in the similar size area. Mine was very sluggy. I mean, and no one is, my largest is, whatever, mid six figures. But it wasn't even the check. It was just the parts that kept me going, where it was almost more,
Yeah.
it was psychological,
It
and
keeps
the
you
moment.
going. You're like, "Oh,
Yeah.
someone thinks this is a," like, I'm not just echoing into this
Yes.
so
Yeah.
one thing that I wish I'd done
Yes,
earlier
I was gonna say,
in
go
my
can you I would love to do this if I could just, get a question in, because I think it's like, what what have you grown in, like, for the people who are listening and in the seats that we were in a couple years ago, what is your wish? What would you do over, around from the learning through all the scars and unlocks you've had and the success you've had?
I had a woman really early on, before I'd even decided to raise a fund, tell me that she had raised a successful fund in Australia. It was a real estate fund. And that the reason she had been so successful is all of her investors had a vested interest in the businesses in the portfolio doing well. So she was acquiring janitorial services and paving services and roofing services. And she went and she pitched all of the biggest real estate holders in Australia. And they could get better rates from implementing these portfolio companies. And so as a result, they wanted to give her money. That they had an upside in the portfolio doing well other than just capital. And I couldn't quite figure out who that was in GovTech for a while. And now that I have figured out basically an ICP, like a perfect profile of a person, it has become so much easier. And it's an exited GovTech founder who wants access to an angel portfolio. It's an existing GovTech CEO who may want to acquire an early stage company. It's later stage investors in GovTech who don't have access to sort of sub-$1 million ARR deals, but want it for their pipeline. It's the M&A leads in GovTech who wanna understand the ecosystem so that they can mix and match. It's the service providers in GovTech, so recruiters and HR and finance who all wanna work with these GovTech companies as they scale. And that has created this pretty remarkable ecosystem of people who have a genuine interest in seeing this portfolio do well, who have a genuine interest in working directly with the companies themselves, and have a genuine interest in getting to know each other. And that was my biggest unlock, which
Yeah.
was I was fund of funds, I was pitching institutional investors, but I didn't realize that $15 million fund was not gonna be a fit for a pension fund,
Yeah,
but
I can't get out of bed for a check less than 50,000,000.
narrowing.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah. It was the narrowing of the LP set
Yeah.
that allowed me to scale more quickly.
It's hard, right? I call it podcast FOMO, and I'm somewhat guilty of this too. It's like you hear all these allocators and writing all these big checks, but and I'm sure we've pitched all the same ones and like hoping that we would get on the list and have a lottery ticket in. But it sounds like it was just the hard yards, right? Of less is more, and finding the people who care about it and screw everyone else. It's kind of the same. It's funny. It's the thing we tell our founders, isn't it? Like, do things that don't scale. Um, Find your ICP, right? And then sometimes we're just like, but this really large institutional allocator could take me over the top, right? It sounds
I
like.
know, it's just like, "I just would love this $3 million check in my $50 million fund." And the reality is now there are a few fund of funds who are really a genuine fit for this because the type of fund is a fit for them, the concentration, the narrowness, the solo GP, the size, whatever those check marks are. But I will say 90% of my investors are people in this corner
Yeah.
of the market.
I love that. I love that. I think for anyone who's listening, they need to listen to this, and it's so easy to say, but hard to do. What I'm taking the lesson listening to you, and it resonates with my lived experience for better, for worse, and why I have these bags under their eyes. Find your people, get those first. And if they are unconventional, that's a feature, not a bug, right? It's actually the first podcast host the first podcast guest, Kevin Moore at GovTech Ventures, gave me the same feedback, which was grow where you're planted. He's in
Yeah.
Oklahoma. I was like, I don't grow where you're planted. It's like I have a plane, I'll go, but like I'm raising from here. We need net new. We need people who think different in this area, and it sounds like you're resonant with that thought.
Yeah, completely. It's yeah, completely.
There's so many things I want to talk about, and I know I want to get out you on time. I want to leave a couple minutes to Kibitz as well before you have to leave. So I want to go through a couple things I want to hit. I would be remiss with the name of the podcast Alone Together, to not talk about being a solo GP. And in my experience, I have some allocators, and I named this podcast as a little bit of a FU to the allocators that, oh, we don't do solo GPs. So and I'm okay just like owning it. What's your experience been? Because you've cited as a thing, like what's your experience been as as a solo GP raising in terms of good, bad? I clearly have a bias by the snarky nature of the name of this pod, but what's been your lived experience on the trail, both with founders as well as LPs is probably the ones where I've raised the biggest, found the biggest resistance or questions about being a solo GP. What's your experience been around that?
It's interesting. I don't know that it's come up as much for me as a piece of resistance. I
Hmm.
know some of my LPs or prospective LPs were sort of like, well, what happens if you fall off a cliff?
Yeah, get hit by.
And so
That's
have
usually the dad joke I always ask. How
yeah,
close have
the
you
hit guy
actually
that's
been
not
to
is
getting hit
the
by a
like
bus?
typical one. Like, well, I'm just gonna avoid crossing streets for the next 10 years, obviously. Um,
Invest in
I
something around traffic signs. I'm sorry.
yeah, yeah, need local government, guys. Come on, I'm gonna solve for it. Um, I think that the bigger holdup for me in terms of LP interest has been the focus of the fund,
Mm,
because it's a corner of the market most people have a hard time getting comfortable with.
mm.
So I've had a lot of people pass who just said, like, I'm not sure we can get conviction on this market because we don't understand it enough. As a solo GP, I have first of all, this is like again goes back to the lobbying days and coalition building. I have surrounded myself with people who are a lot smarter than me at things. Who
Yeah,
I either have regular with. I have a fractional CFO. That was my first hire because I just thought I can't get this wrong.
yeah,
And I'm comfortable with the model. I'm comfortable with finance, and I've got a business degree, but I really need someone to be a check and a balance here to make sure the process is moving forward and I'm doing everything by the book. And I'm not just sort of like hoping this all works out. So that was like an initial, just huge weight off my shoulders because I felt there was someone really smart there who understood the business and could push back on me and be a thought partner. Um, and my initial instinct was to hire the biggest law firm, go with Carta, uh, go with Silicon Valley Bank. Like I wanted all these big names because I just thought that would really legitimize me. And what I found over time is that I was such a nit on a gnat for those places that I wasn't getting any focus and attention.
yeah,
I'm still with Carta. I think they're fine. And I went with like a very small law firm who's been tremendous.
yeah,
And I switched banks to people who knew my name and wanted to get me in rooms with other GPs and LPs and knew the thesis and came up with ideas. And so I sort of moved away from just the big banner names into actual partnerships that I felt like were moving my ball forward and were real co collaborators. And then these LPs that I work with, who I think are so smart, and I'm really, really lucky, I have a pretty regular cadence with them.
Yeah, what is it?
And, one of them it's like I've got a guy who I just think is so smart and he thinks about the world differently. We see a lot of the same deal flow because he's a angel investor and he has a very, very small fund himself. And so we're seeing a lot of the same things and we are approaching them totally differently, but we often come to the same conclusion. And so we've been really getting to know each other. We talk monthly. We talk about deal flow. We send each other feedback. And it's been really helpful to have sort of a co-conspirator. I often make different choices than he does and vice versa. But it's helpful to talk out loud about stuff, and so the
Yeah,
more I've really surround myself with an opportunity to talk out loud about things with smart people, and then be able to because the joy of this then is, like, I get to make the final call, and there's
yeah,
something so deeply satisfying about that.
yes,
Um, it's that's been, like, the most exciting part.
yeah. I had the same experience, and I was filming season 16 of The Pitch, so I'm on the panel with Charles Hudson at Precursor, Elizabeth Yin at Hustle Fund, Michelle Kwok at Draper, and Jesse Middleton at Flybridge. And it was funny. We had a founder come on the show, and it'll air. But it was funny. Like they all passed. I said yes to this particular founder, and they kind of tore him apart a little bit. And I said, I want you to know, I actually see all the same things that my colleagues see. And I say yes. Like and
Right.
it's so satisfying. I don't have to ask. I don't have to take it to IC. I don't have to. Here's my IC. Do you want to do it? Yeah,
I
we
don't
should
have
do
to
it. It's like,
fight for this, right?
let's
I'm
do
gonna
it.
I'm gonna have done enough of the back and forth internally and with my peers and with these experts I've surrounded myself with that by the time I get to a yes, I am like a full conviction yes.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't wanna have to go argue with someone on why I'm a full conviction yes. I will have done the pre-work to get there.
Preach, sister. Preach. Hey, we're coming about the hour, and I want to ask the standards are on my show is I ask four questions at the end, and I call it fast four. So, and my
Okay.
encouragement for you, I didn't preview this for you, is like the parameters are as an investor, and then my
Okay.
first thought is overfeel, don't overthink these answers. So, um, with the parameters of being an investor and I being quick, tell me quickly or tell our audience quickly about the best day you had as GP of GovTech Ventures.
I was asked to give a keynote speech at the International City Managers Association in, Orlando, Florida, the Renaissance SeaWorld, Orlando, Florida, and it was to 400 city managers, and they wanted to learn about AI. And I had an hour-long keynote where I got to talk to them about why procuring technology the old way no longer applies to AI. And it
Awesome.
was this really cool moment where, I mean, I met hundreds of them, and they came up to the next day I was in the gym and one of the guys came up to me and said, "I've been up all night thinking about what you said, and I've got my list of how you think I should do this, and I'm gonna buy technology differently going forward." And, like, that was so cool. That was
That
so
was
cool
awesome.
to
That
feel
was
like
awesome.
I actually may have shifted the way that cities think about buying companies.
That's crazy. That's so rewarding. Um,
Yeah.
you could probably guess the second question with the parameters investor. Like, tell me about the worst day you've had.
Oh, man. Which one to pick from, really? I mean, it's I would say the moment in September where I was 9 months in and I didn't have a single dollar and I didn't really know how to get to whatever was happening next. I felt lost, I felt committed to the vision, but I just felt like I could see it, but I couldn't get to it, and that it actually might never come to fruition. Um, in the car with my husband driving back from Colorado, I would say that was a real low point.
Yeah.
Saying it out loud, being like, "This just I'm not sure this is gonna work."
The third question is may ladder logically, but who would you like to shout out on getting to where you are today?
Oh my god, Tom Spengler, number 1, my OG, and Javier Moniz, they're the founders of a company called Granicus, which is one of the biggest in the space, and they were the guys that called and were like, "You're it. We're picking you. we're in. We want to make this happen. So they have been tremendous. Nate Levine, who's another LP, and he's the founder of a company called OpenGov, which is another one of the biggest ones in our space. And he's the one I talk
Yeah.
to every month. And I just
We
super
invested.
smart.
When I was at S2E Ventures. I mean, we're at S2E. We were GovTech, so we were Open Gov people. So that was a good one.
Yeah, there you go. Nate. Um, I love the way his brain works, and I really enjoy sort of our monthly cadence. Teal Lidow, who's my lawyer, he's the best. He is not cheap, and he is responsive and thoughtful and creative and smart. And I just feel like he's been a real partner. So those
That's a
are. Oh, and my
that,
fractional CFO, I should shout Nakama, Andrew Brown. What's up?
that's awesome. It's so funny. I actually thought I was leading the witness with this question because I thought the husband was going to make it into the mix.
Oh, oh yeah. I wait. We should cut that. He is. He's the number one supporter. He is. He's really. He's the OG. Every
I didn't
time I'm
mean to
like,
get
this
you in
is gonna
trouble. I
work.
don't know your husband. I don't want to get.
Oh my god. Cut it. Cut it. Start with like my beautiful
This is
husband, Drew Waller.
I always
He's
joke. I told my wife, and she was at my AGM, and actually I shouted her. She's a doctor, doesn't know this world. She was super embarrassed. Like, that's my first LP.
Yeah,
I
he
was
is.
I thought
He has not let me quit. He has not let me quit. I wanted him to tell me to quit every single day and be like, go do something easier, go do something where you're going to make more money. And he never once said it, even though I was like, please tell me to stop doing this. He's like, I'm not going to tell you to stop doing this. You're great at it. Don't
we
do
may
it.
have a show with our spouse with GP spouses on this. Here's the last question for you. Um, how do you want to be remembered?
I want to be remembered as someone who drew a spotlight to what I would argue is the most important functions of government, and that I left the systems better than they were to begin with.
That was awesome. Listen, it is, when I say it's an honor, I mean it personally to have time with you. I always think that this is such a, I know we're both, what we do is crazy. That you would spend this much time with me is a blessing. So thank you.
You're a
For those
delight.
who are
Thank you.
listening and want to get a hold of you, what is the best way to get a hold of you?
LinkedIn is a really big inbound engine for me. I do a weekly go to market 1 to 3 minute video on GovTech. So it's great for founders building in the space. And then Rachel at GovTechVentures.com.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to leave it there, listeners of Alone Together. Thank you for tuning in. Please like and subscribe if you want to hear stuff like this and amazing GPs like Rachel. Please get at her if you're interested in the space, and please tune in for the next time here on Alone Together. We are so blessed to have you and look forward to the next episode. Thank you, Rachel.